Hi, I'm Zachary Hunter, and welcome to the Explain It to Me podcast. EITM is about info without gatekeeping and encouraging curiosity, community, and education without drowning in jargon. This is the third episode in my little mini-series about my favorite TV show of all time, Doctor Who. I gave a viewing guide to the modern era in the last episode, jumping on and off points, that sort of thing. And if you found it or this episode worthwhile, please like, rate, and subscribe to EITM so that the algorithms let us grow this show into what I believe it can be. Thanks. I appreciate it, and you. Today I'm going to try to explain to you how to approach the 155 plus stories over almost 700 episodes in Doctor Who's classic era. Put simply, I won't be able to do that in both one digestible episode and with any level of detail. I will, however, do my best. And if you provide the curiosity, I will do my best to provide the info without the gatekeeping. So please, let me share with you what I know about this madman traveling around in a blue box. And today, let's look at the show as it ran from the 23rd of November 1963 to the 6th of December 1989, plus the TV movie from May of 96. Basically, everything official and put on film before the show came back in 2005, aka the modern era, covered in my last episode. Okay, so what doctors are we talking about? There have been 8 actors playing the Doctor on the show. I'm not counting images of early doctors shown in the brain of Morbius, or the multiple people who played the first Doctor due to vacations / ill health / death of William Hartnell. So I'm just the main line of the first through the 8th Doctors. The names are as follows: William Hartnell, the first Doctor; Patrick Troughton, the second; John Pertwee, the third; Tom Baker, the fourth; Peter Davison, the fifth Doctor; Colin Baker, no relation, the sixth; Sylvester McCoy, the seventh; and in the TV movie, Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor. Okay, let's break it down. First, unlike the modern era, most of the classic era did not have season arcs or distinctive eras surrounding specific companions, like Clara Oswald as, quote, the impossible girl, end quote, with the 11th Doctor, and as a friendship so dear that not even betrayal could dent it for the 12th. There are a few notable exceptions, which I'll get to, but I think the best place to start is at the beginning. It's a very good place to start. So let's start with the first season and the first 2 stories of the second. In the 13 months between November 63 and December 64, there were 51 episodes and 10 stories. See, back then they were serialized with multiple episodes per story. In fact, until the 26th story, which is near the end of season 3, each episode got its own title. This gets really confusing. For example, the first story is usually called An Unearthly Child, but that's technically the name of the first episode of a story, some title 100,000 BC. But only the craziest Whovians would call it that. Anyway, let's talk about that first era. If you want to see a dramatized version of the behind-the-scenes of it all, there's a 50th anniversary biopic, An Adventure in Space and Time. But on screen, it centers around that unearthly child herself, Susan Foreman, aka the Doctor's granddaughter. See, her teachers, human, Ian and Barbara, follow the strange girl home, and the Doctor, who doesn't exactly know how to pilot the TARDIS, takes them all on a series of adventures. But then, in, quote, the Dalek invasion of Earth, end quote, Susan remains in the 22nd century, and the TARDIS, crew begins to change. That invasion in the second season, like the second story of the first, features the Daleks, the most memorable villain of Doctor Who by far. They were created by Terry Nation, and when not overused, have given us some great stories. These are those Nazi space robots that look like salt shakers. The first Dalek story actually has recently been rejiggered into a single streamlined colorized version called, well, The Daleks in Color. If you want to give it a go, but the big point is that in that first season, plus 2 stories, the show is making it up as it goes along. Sometimes they do historical stories, like the Aztecs and the Reign of Terror. And sometimes crazy sci-fi, like the Daleks or the Sensorites. And the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids decades before that movie came out story called Planet of Giants. The problem is, and these early stories are imperfect, but rather that we can't see all of them. See, the BBC, quote, junked, end quote. That is to say, wiped and recorded over a lot of the first 2 Doctor stories, especially the second. Of the 253 episodes of the first 6 seasons, aka those first 2 Doctors, 97 are missing, with 49 being remade as cartoons with the original audio, 1 as a live-action remake because none of the stars are actually in, quote, Mission to the Unknown anyway, so why not? You can actually check it out on YouTube. Might be worth a watch. And several have been pieced together using clips, photos, and fan-recorded audio. There are some real gems there in the restored animated episodes and the First Doctor's era generally. But honestly, story-wise, other than An Unearthly Child, which is intact, the 2 already mentioned Dalek stories, The Daleks and Dalek Invasion of Earth, I'd really only suggest 1, The Aztecs, which is a fun historical story that aired between those 2. 2, The Time Meddler, which shows us the first example of the Doctor's people besides him and Susan, though they weren't called Time Lords yet. 3, the standalone story, The War Machines. And 4, the final First Doctor story, The 10th Planet, which introduces us to the original version of the villains known as the Cybermen and shows us the first regeneration sequence. The final episode of The 10th Planet, other than the actual regeneration itself, is missing. But the animated replacement finishes the story, and if you watch Twice Upon a Time, the story at the end of the 12th Doctor's era, you'll actually appreciate both stories a lot more. Anyway, those 7 stories of the First Doctor, or 33 episodes, give you a great intro and sets up Patrick Troughton's second Doctor. So, Troughton. He has a huge influence on modern Doctor Who. From influencing Matt Smith's portrayal as the 11th Doctor, to introducing us to the Brigadier, Unit, and the Sonic Screwdriver, to debuting villains like the Great Intelligence, popularizing ones like the Cybermen, and also the finale of the Second Doctor has us meet the Time Lords for real this time. All told, there's a lot of fun to be had with Troughton, especially if you're okay with watching the animated restorations / recreations, of which there are a bunch. In fact, that starts at the very beginning as his very first story, The Power of the Daleks, which has to explain / justify to the audience and the companions both regeneration and why the Doctor is now a younger man with a different face and personality. That story is entirely missing, except for the audio track. But probably worth checking out. Then, story-wise, I would skip ahead to The Tomb of the Cybermen, Web of Fear, The Mind Robber, The Invasion, and finally, The War Games, aka the final story. What about them? Well, Tomb of the Cybermen and The Invasion are both great Cybermen stories. And Invasion, along with Web of Fear, sets up the organization UNIT and its leader, the so-called Brigadier, who are collectively reoccurring characters for 9 of the next 12 Doctors. The Mind Robber is crazy and really pushes the boundaries story-wise. Now, as for the War Games, it is a long 10-part story that drags in the middle. But that final episode is pivotal. See, the Doctor goes on trial, and he is exiled to Earth and forced to regenerate into the Third Doctor. Basically, the Time Lords execute him. Troughton will be back for 3 more stories, and his companion who inspired the show Outlander, Jamie McCrimmon, would actually join him for 2 of those. But his legacy, the Second Doctor's, is felt throughout the show, even though a lot of his stories are incomplete due to that junking policy, some are missing fully. So, Jon Pertwee's Third Doctor shows up in the story Spearhead from Space, which in many ways is the second pilot of the show. See, now Doctor Who is in color. He's stuck on 70s/80s Earth, and the whole vibe of the show changes. Far more James Bond. Spearhead, along with its immediate follow-up, Doctor Who and the Silurians, are great introductions to the Third Doctor, along with 2 villains, the Autons, Autons, and the Silurians, who have reoccurred in various ways throughout even the modern era of the show. Madame Vastra, people like that. That first season finale, Inferno, which is also Liz Shaw's last appearance as a companion, is probably a good story to watch as well. In his second season, Pertwee's Doctor meets his greatest rival, the Master. Pertwee's Third Doctor and Roger Delgado's Master play it as Holmes and Moriarty. But that rivalry is essential to Doctor Who all the way up to the 13th Doctor as of the time I record this. Also, that season is the first season-long arc of sorts of the show that the show had ever done, with the Doctor, alongside a new companion, Jo Grant, fighting the Master story after story. The best, most important of that bunch are Terror of the Autons, a sequel to Spearhead, and the Daemons, Daemons. The Daemons is weird to modernize and has elements of the occult and religion versus science, which may not be for everyone, just FYI. Season 9, frankly, can be skipped, but the following year, the 3 Doctors 10th anniversary special, and the season finale, The Green Death, should not be. The 3 Doctors has William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, and Pertwee team up together. After that, the best stories are the 5th and final season's The Time Warrior, where we meet longtime companion Sarah Jane Smith, who in the modern era we know from School Reunion and the 4th season finale. It's also the Sontarans' first appearance. After that, Planet of the Spiders, which is Pertwee's farewell story, though that one is more in the important category instead of it being a great story. So you might want to skip it if you're not loving his Doctor. Up to you. After that farewell, we go straight into most people's favorite Doctor, Tom Baker, aka the Fourth Doctor. And obviously, as with all times, a new Doctor, great place to jump on. While I've never met either man, to keep it clear, I'll use Tom and Colin to distinguish the Fourth and Sixth Doctors. Anyway, Tom's first season is 5 connected stories, the most important of which is Genesis of the Daleks. One of the best Dalek stories ever, and arguably the start of the Time War that hangs over the modern era of Doctor Who. Speaking of stories affecting modern ones, I should mention Pyramids of Mars, plus the already mentioned Brain of Morbius from the following season, still with Sarah Jane. As for season 14, while Sarah Jane Smith's goodbye in The Hand of Fear connects directly to appearances in School Reunion in the modern era, plus her 2 spin-offs, while that's historically important, I can't say that story is even in the top 4 for that season. But as for what is, now we get to talk a little bit about 1. The Deadly Assassin, 2. The Robots of Death, 3. The Talons of Weng-Chiang, and 4. The Face of Evil. The Deadly Assassin is one of the first 2 Doctor Who stories I ever saw. So it is hard to be fully objective about this story, but it is really good. It is the only story of the classic era without a companion, and it sets up a bunch of Time Lord mythology. As for the rest of the season, going in order, Face of Evil intros the companion Leela, just like the character in Futurama, her name was, in a fun little romp. Robots of Death is basically Agatha Christie with androids. And Talons of Weng-Chiang, Weng-Chiang, is the Doctor and Leela in a terrific Sherlock Holmes-style story that simultaneously establishes the 51st century as when humans develop time travel, as seen with Captain Jack Harkness in the modern era, and also as a very racist, as in yellowface Fu Manchu-style racist Victorian adventure. After those stories, unless you want more Leela, I'd skip to season 16, aka the Key to Time season. Ribos Operation, R-I-B-O-S, sets up the arc and introduces Romana, a Time Lady companion for the Doctor, who, over 2 regenerations, Romana 1 and 2, is very much his equal, in a way that only River Song ever matches afterwards, in my opinion. The second story, Pirate Planet, it being written by Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy author Douglas Adams gives you some idea of how fun it is. The Androids of Tara, T-A-R-A, is basically an old story called The Prisoner of Zenda, except with, well, androids. Finally, part 6 of the arc, The Armageddon Factor, ends the story and sets up the so-called Black Guardian trilogy years later. After that, Destiny of the Daleks, which lets us meet Romana 2, played by Laura Ward, and serves as a lighthearted follow-up / sequel to Genesis of the Daleks. And then my recommendation is City of Death, which, as I mentioned in a previous video, is a crazy good story, again by Douglas Adams, in part, involving the Mona Lisa, creation of life on Earth, and a John Cleese of Monty Python cameo in a modern art museum for no real reason. It's fun. And it's in Paris. Skipping ahead, while State of Decay is a fun vampire romp set in the so-called E-Space trilogy of stories where Adric joins and Romana 2 plus the second robot dog named K9 leaves, I would suggest skipping to the trilogy of stories Keeper of Traken, Traken, Logopolis, and Castrovalva. That trilogy is the farewell to Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor, and hello to two new companions, Nyssa and Tegan, plus Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor. Davison's Fifth Doctor in stories like Arc of Infinity, plus the Black Guardian trilogy I mentioned of Modron Undead, Terminus, and Enlightenment, gives us sequels to Three Doctors and The Key to Time respectively, but you could skip those. The Five Doctors, though, the 20th anniversary special and the other of my first two stories, is a must-see. After that, watch The Caves of Androzani, Androzani, which is a fantastic farewell for Davison and a touching story in its own right. Plus, that story finally explains the celery he wears on his coat. You'll see. Now, for Colin Baker, aka the Sixth Doctor, the only story you should really consider is The Trial of a Time Lord, which is all 14 episodes of season 23. It isn't the best arc, but if you aren't going to watch Colin's entire run with the Ronnie and things like that, either go for Trial or skip him. Colin seems like an okay guy, but he and the show didn't get along for a long time, fans included, and he didn't even come back for season 24, aka what became Sylvester McCoy's first season, alongside Mel, who joined the Trial of a Time Lord. Joined during the Trial of a Time Lord. McCoy's Seventh Doctor doesn't really start taking off until the story Dragonfire at the end of that first season, when we meet Ace and say goodbye to Mel until the 14th Doctor in 2023. After that story, watch Remembrance of the Daleks, which is McCoy's best story and a great anniversary special. And I would suggest then the whole of season 26. In it, Battlefield has the Brigadier and an interdimensional King Arthur story. Ghostlight, Curse of Fenric, Fenric, and Survival are an Ace-focused trilogy that ends the classic run. That arc is the closest to the modern era in how companions are treated and developed. Story-wise, that might not be the best, but it brings this chapter of the show to an end. The finale of Survival was December 6th, 1989, and we did not have new Doctor Who until May of 96, when McCoy regenerates into Paul McGann's Eighth Doctor for a TV movie of which I cannot recommend, unless you have really fallen for the show, or just want to see Eric Roberts chew the scenery as the master. So there we go. Not exactly a lightning round guide to the classic era of Doctor Who, but there was a lot of material. I tried my best to avoid spoilers, even for stories that are 6 decades old now. But I hope you have some idea of which stories to consider watching, be it on Tubi, BBC iPlayer, or by other means. So, hopefully I've kept your attention on this run-through of the classic era. I'm already working on the next episode, so please subscribe to help me grow EITM. And please tell your friends about the show. Also, if you're willing to help out monetarily, you can go to ko-fi.com/EITMpod. No matter what, though, please, just give Doctor Who a chance. Even the classic, okay? Thanks again. God bless. And best of luck out there.